Well, hello, beautiful soul. Welcome to this week's Ignited Teachable Moment. I am Rhonda Kennard, your fierce, fiery, and fearless, two words, not one, Ignited Life and Success Coach. And I am bringing you weekly Ignited Teas. And so, what that means is that we have a chat about a topic that really impacts all of us, or at least the people in my tribe and in my community. And we talk about how we can overcome some of the obstacles. Barriers to success really is what they are, right? And they're not barriers we can't move, but sometimes we are so used to versus coffee, and I do enjoy a good cup of tea, my friend. So, and I really like the teas that have inspirational messages because I'm an inspirational type of person. I love being inspired and I love to inspire. So even these little things get me excited. But today's tea, I forget the brand I'm drinking. It's lemongrass, but it says, "He who wants a rose must respect the thorn." Persian proverb. And the first thing I thought of when I saw that as I was making this tea was, tell me your perspective. Actually, I'm going to tell you mine, but I want to tell you to go ahead in the comments, whether you're watching live or you're watching the replay. Please, what was your take on that? Okay, so my take was really that sometimes we want all the great things in life, but we don't want the challenges and the work that come with it, right? We want the dream, right? But we don't want to hustle. We want the love, but we don't want to learn how to communicate effectively. We want the job with the money, but we don't want to do the work required to get that job. So that's what that made me think about. So if you want that beautiful thing that's revered and loved and cherished and honored, you've got to be willing to respect all the parts of that and everything you need to do to get that. So, with that being said, let me sip my tea. Let me make sure it's not going to burn my lips here live. Woo, okay. I'm your fiery coach, but I don't want to get burned by some tea. Okay, this is very light. It's lemongrass, right? So, very light and yummy. Okay, so let's jump right in. Okay, so if I'm looking down, it's because I have notes here because I'm very cognizant of the time. I do not want to go on and on and on. I try to make these 30 minutes or less. Very hard to do when the topics are really juicy, but we are going to aim for that today. So if I'm not looking here and I'm looking here, it's because I have my notes here to keep us on track. Okay, so we today are talking about communication when love is hard. Okay. Now, if you have ever loved, then you know that there are times in a relationship where the communication is not going to be rosy, right? It's not going to feel good. It's going to be difficult. And I'm not just talking about love in as in like eros or intimate love with romantic love with, spouse, partner, bae, boyfriend, girlfriend, that kind of thing. I'm also talking about agape love, which is just a love for humanity. And sometimes when you're just trying to be a really good person and someone is just in that moment, just man, pushing all the buttons, you're like, I'm really trying to do the right thing, Jesus, right? But this person, oh my gosh, and so those moments can get really difficult. And what I know after my 43 orbits around the sun, okay, my 17 years married, 15, almost 16 years as a mom, 22 years in entrepreneurship and working in corporate America, let me tell you what I know, that if you don't master how to communicate when love is hard, you're going to lose some very important people, places, and things in your life, not because they were bad or because they were toxic, but simply because of the disconnect in how you were able to communicate with them. And I see a lot with my clients who are trying to set boundaries. So if I have to give you any frame of this today, outside of love relationships, romantic love, I want you to also think about setting boundaries, right, with people you love. And a lot of times with my coaching clients, the same theme comes up every single time, and it's when it's time to begin to set a boundary. or let people know how they need to interact with or treat you moving forward, communicating that becomes very difficult. And a lot of times, what you'll hear people say is, well, I don't want confrontation. I didn't say anything, so I don't want to have confrontation. And, my heart aches when I hear that because I understand it. I grew up in a home where everyone was a horrible communicator and communication was tough. It was scary. It would become violent. I mean, and I'm serious. I've seen knives being pulled out, people's clothes being tossed out windows, fights with people who were friends, who were in love, who loved each other, who were brother, sister, cousins, aunts, uncles, all of that, because when it came down to how to communicate, when love was hard, right? There was no skill there. And so this isn't something we talk about very often. We talk about communicating when everything's great and body language. And I do a lot of training for communicating for job interviews and look positive and how you can portray confidence when you're sitting or talking or speaking, right? But very little, if not at all, do we hear about how to effectively communicate when love is hard. And when it's hard, that's when it matters most. Communicating with you when you're my friend and things are going great, oh, that's easy, right? But when I'm frustrated, when there's a manager at work that is being very disrespectful, or there's a person who you feel violated you or said something that was just completely not acceptable, those are the moments when communication is the most important. And if you don't know how to effectively communicate when love, agape love, is hard, then you run the risk, then you run the risk of losing relationships, losing opportunities, and losing jobs because you didn't have the skill. So, what we're going to talk about today is how to communicate effectively when love is hard. Okay, let's see here. So, I want to start by saying um, this conversation is not going to be for the proud or somebody who's wearing an ego, right? So if you've got your ego on, you're wearing it like a jacket or a shirt today, or it's a crown on your head, however you showed up wearing ego. If you're someone who is totally self righteous, conceited, like, hey, it's my way, it's everybody else. There was this episode of Martin, and he's telling Gina, like, how it's everyone else in the world is horrible. And she says, really, Martin? It's everybody else. He's like, I know. Some of us show up in these groups and in these conversations like it's everyone else. And when you're in patterns, you don't see it. So this conversation is really for someone who wants to be open to a new possibility so that they can make a new choice, right? Because we have a choice in how we communicate, even when love is hard. And what I'm going to challenge you to do today is think about what you want the outcome to be, right? And based on that outcome, then there's some things you need to do differently than what you've been doing, because the way you've been communicating when it's hard, when you have to set a boundary, when you have to tell someone enough's enough, when you have to tell them you did something, right? Um, that hasn't been working. And so here's an opportunity to learn something new. But you have to let go of ego and right versus wrong in order to receive something new. So, what is communication, right? Let's start with that. Let's all get on the same page. What's communication? Well, it's a process by which information is exchanged between individuals through a common system of symbols, signs, or behaviors. Also, it's an exchange of information. Communication can be perceived as two-way. So I wanted to stop there as I was doing research for this ignited teachable moment here this week. I this particular definition came from Yahoo. And the part that I said, I don't know, I agree too much with is the part where communication is a common system of symbols, signs, or behaviors, right? I don't necessarily agree with that. I'm going to tell you why. Because to say it's a common system is part of the reason why it's so difficult for us to communicate when love is hard, because communication styles, what baggage you're bringing along to that conversation is not common. It's actually from a unique perspective and journey and path to where we are at that moment. And I believe a lot of the reason why communication is so hard is because we go into it thinking that the other person is where we are, that they have the same needs, the same values, the same perceived experience. And I don't believe that it's always common, right? So this is where the struggle comes in. And so this is kind of where I want to meet you guys in here. The first thing I want you to take from this conversation today is that communication is not always common. You're going to show up with your thought about the thing, the situation. The other person is going to show up with their thought about the situation. Here's a great example. So recently, my mom got married. Yay, go mom, 70. What? Stella got her groove back. Don't hate. Yes. Yes, right? But she married a wonderful gentleman named Jerry. So they moved to Alabama, but they had to come back here to take care of some business. And so the day they were leaving, my mom had mentioned, hey, I'm going to come back and drop off this box before we hit the road. Cool, cool. This is great because in my mind, great, I'm going to say goodbye, give her one last hug, because she moved away to Alabama and I don't know when I'm going to see her again. And I know in this crazy world we live in, I don't take that for granted. So I want a goodbye, a long hug, like I do long goodbyes. So the next day, which was a Sunday, I'm expecting her to come at like 10:30. Well, she sends me a text message and says it's like 10:40, and she's like, oh, you know what, we're not coming, we just hit the road, we had to make a detour to go drop off some things, and now we're on the road, and I'll just talk to you probably tomorrow. Okay, so here's an example of where communication's not common, right? I immediately am upset. Like feelings hurt, all in my feelings. It's my mom. What do you mean you're not coming over? I was expecting a long goodbye, right? And then now I'm upset. And I held on to that for a minute. I'll be honest, I held on to that for a minute because I could not understand why she didn't come say goodbye to me. Okay. So I wanted it to diffuse, and I go through exercises where I really dig deep into my feelings and I try to understand my feelings before I attempt to share them with someone else, right? Because if you don't understand your feelings and then you come into a conversation and you don't understand really the root cause of why you feel how you feel, it's just horrible for the person you're trying to communicate to because you don't even know really what's wrong, right? A lot of times when you uncover the layers or you peel back the layers, you find that the thing you're mad about, that's not it. It's really this other thing. So I was trying to get to the root cause of it all. So eventually I talked to my mom about it and I call her and I'm like, I'm really annoyed. And she's like, well, okay, hello to you too. I'm like, I'm just really annoyed. Like, my feelings are hurt. You did not come and say goodbye. Like, you don't even care. You're married now. You got your new man. You don't care about me. It's been me and you. My father passed away from ALS. And very long time ago, almost a decade ago. And I'm just like, and I'm like, having this moment. And then my mom's perception of the experience, right? On the other side, she's like, oh my gosh, like, no, we just honestly left the box and wanted to hit the road before traffic got bad. And, it was a long drive. And so I say all that to say that sometimes communication is not common because we assume, if we assume it's common, we assume that the other person has the same thought process, the pattern of thinking, the emotions, the energy, they're vibrating at the same frequency, right? And that's not always the case. So I don't always believe that it's common. And in order for you to have better communication, when love is hard, you have to understand that it isn't common. That's number one. The second thing you have to understand is that the other person has not come to this experience wanting to hurt you. Okay? That's so important to remember. Not only do they not want to hurt you, but they're probably hurting in their own way as well. So, I am a crier when I get upset. I'll admit that I'm a crier. My husband is not. The way he shows his emotion very different from me. And what I had to learn is that just because he's not a wreck, he's not crying, his face isn't sad, that does not mean that he isn't having an experience of his own because of our disconnect and our lack of communication at the time, right? So this is why I said you had to leave ego at the door, because what I'm suggesting, in order for you to have effective communication when love is hard, is for you to first take a look at how you are setting the tone for how the communication will go. Are you expecting something from the other side? And I don't mean other side like opponent, I just mean the other party, that you're expecting something from them that they can't give you because your perception is your own, right? And then also remember that on the other side of that is someone else who is having an experience, is having an emotion around it. And it's important for you to understand that, um, because then you can honor the other person's space as you effectively share how you feel. Okay. So let's keep going here. Let me see here. So, any questions? Anyone want to say anything in the chat? Pop it on in there. Let me test that out. Let's say test chat to make sure we are rocking and rolling. Yes. If there is a lag, I will know that immediately as well. Okay. So now let's get back to communication. I was talking about my husband having a different way to communicate. So we know there's verbal and nonverbal communication, right? But it's also what you do versus what you say. And I am a talker, you can tell. Again, husband is not. Some people in my life, talkers like me, others not, right? So you cannot look at their communication and say, well, you're not communicating the right way, or you didn't tell me, or you're not showing me, or you don't seem mad. I'm the only one mad about this, because you're making the assumption, which is built on the foundation of ego, that they should be responding how you respond, as if the way you're responding is the only right way to respond to a difficult communicating situation or experience. It's also something I want you to remember about communicating and how we communicate love. That's important. And this is to really get you to start thinking about these things the next time you are in a difficult situation, or if you're in one right now. You might be in a situation right now where you're just not talking to somebody, you're totally mad at them, right? And I bet they don't even know you're mad, or they don't know the extent to which you are really angered about the situation. Because again, their perspective of what happened is completely different from yours. Not because they're downplaying it, not because they think you're overreacting, but simply because you're different and you came to that space different. Okay. So it's not that they don't care about you or just being dismissive, right? But you're holding on to your anger, plus the fact that they're not responding how you think they should, but they're responding exactly how they should, because it's their experience and their perception up until this point in life. Okay. So, communicating love, I had to learn through marriage that how we communicate, it really is different. Even though my husband and I are one, we're together, we're still two individuals. And recently I would like get really upset with him about, like, you didn't finish the dishes, or why didn't you sort your clothes the right way when you put them in the hampers, right? Because I'm doing the laundry, or he missed a date night. He was so tired from work. And I was like really going on about these things. Like, I was really upset. And it actually took a good friend of mine, and then ultimately my husband, to tell me, I show love in a very different way because I was taking everything he was doing to ultimately mean you don't respect me, you don't love me. If you respected me, you wouldn't do certain things. And what it came down to was that how he shows love is very different. He's providing and building a future and a foundation and wealth and a legacy of love and fun and happiness and a financial legacy for my family, his children. That's very different from my role in the relationship, my role in our marriage, my role as the mother of his children. And I had to understand that it's different, equal, because together we create this extraordinary thing we've got going on. But I had to learn not to look at his contribution as a mirror image of mine. It will never be, and vice versa. And I'm telling you that because it's important that you understand that the person that you are trying to love and communicate with is just coming from a very different perspective, and it's okay. People are entitled to their perspectives, they are entitled to their experiences, they are entitled to their feelings, their emotions, and their energy. You cannot deny people what they are entitled to, right? You simply have to learn how to communicate through those differences to understand each other better and then ultimately get to the common goal. And I thought about through my experiences, clients, and then doing a little research, what I've come up with is that communication serves two ultimate end goals. The first is to cultivate, right? The purpose of communication is to cultivate the relationship, to build it, right? What do you need? What do you want? What do you desire? Let's work together. Let's communicate all the things we want to do, all the ways we want to work together. We do all of that, right? For the purpose of cultivating an extraordinary relationship and experience with one another. We also communicate for the purpose of perseverance. I'm sorry, preservation. I was going to say perseverance. We want our relationships to persevere, but preservation and prosperity, right? If I get into a relationship with you and I marry you or I commit to you in some way where I'm here for the long haul, I want to preserve this thing. So when we communicate, and if we're having an issue at the end of the day, listen, I'm not trying to back down from this. I'm on your team, right? And this is what I have told my husband: I am on your team. Okay. And I have told people in boards, friends, wherever I need to. Listen, I'm on your team. I want to preserve this thing. So whatever happens moving forward needs to happen for the purpose of preservation and prosperity, because not only do we want to preserve what we have, right? But we want to build up to something even better together. And sometimes we lose sight of that when we communicate, when it's hard, right? Then we just get into this who's right, who's wrong. And guess what? When you love somebody, if you annihilate them in the conversation, I told him, you get on the phone, girl, let me tell you, I told him, then guess what? Boo, boo. You're not winning. You are never winning when the person you are in a relationship with has taken a verbal lashing beat down because of how you presented yourself and them in a confrontation. That's when it becomes confrontation versus communication. Confrontation's one-sided. Communication is when you two-way want to work to resolve an issue for the purpose of cultivating preservation and prosperity. Okay, and that's important to remember. Nobody's winning. If me and my husband are fighting and he comes at me, which he doesn't, he's so not like that, but I am, right? Who's winning? I'm losing. If my husband's mad at me, I'm losing. If I'm mad at him, he's losing. And together, because we're one, we are losing. So remember, the purpose of the communication is what? Cultivating the relationship, preserving what you have, and prosperity, building on what you have to something greater and better and extraordinary with one another as one. Okay. So I kind of talked a lot about, just these different scenarios where you can, have these types of disconnects in communication. But I want to, there's so much more. This is really a topic that I probably should have split up into like three of these, but I want to give you some do's and do nots when you are in a communication um, experience, and it's tough. It's tough to explain where you stand, how you feel, what your boundary is, their boundary, what that means to you. Like, oh my, like, it can be very difficult. But I want to give you some takeaways. So the first is do one thing to do is do diffuse the situation. When you have a person coming at you for your whole existence in a conversation. Now, this hopefully is not your spouse or mate or bae, okay? But whoever it is, diffuse the situation with love. Okay. Love is hard. It's not easy, right? You're going to say you love folk. You got to love them through this hard stuff too. Okay. I'm talking about agape love. So a couple years ago, this mom from my daughter's school was calling all of these kids that she thought were mean and disrespectful to her daughter. Now I'm a mom, I get it. Be mean and disrespectful to my daughter. I'm throwing bows, okay? I'm throwing bows, right? Right? I get it. I get it. But, she's calling kids, right? Like, okay. So my daughter says, she's calling kids. And I said, well, what I want you to do is give me your phone just in case she calls you. And I swear, 3 minutes later, my daughter's phone rings. This mom picks up the phone. Well, I pick up the phone. This mom's on the other end. She is hot. She is livid. Ooh, she is heated. She is mad. Okay. So she starts kind of, coming at me about my kid and, this happened. And I said, yeah, I talked to my daughter. She didn't say it happened. Yes, it did happen. Yes, it did. And she's very upset. And I get it, right? I understand. Uh, and this mother and I were pretty cordial up to this point. So at one point, she's just like, you're lying, your daughter's lying, and it's getting pretty nasty. And this is the point of communication where now it's becoming very hard. How did I diffuse that situation? She went screaming, called me a liar, called my daughter a liar. What I understood in that situation is I understand that her perspective up to this point is full of I'm a mom, my daughter's been hurt, I'm angry, I'm lashing out at you right now. I didn't take it personal, which is one of the things we're going to talk about for our don'ts. But, she's going on and on. And because I don't have ego, I'm okay with verbal lashings to a degree. But I said to her, this is how I diffused it. I said, beautiful mom. I said her name, but I said, beautiful mom, I love you. I honor you. And I'm not certain why you have started to call me names, but I don't want this conversation to end with us not being friends. I care too much about you as a Black woman to allow this thing between our girls to get in between us. I respect you and I will not raise my voice or yell at you. You know what her next words were? Yeah, that's true. That's true. Her tone was different, and we were able to move forward. No resolution, right? Because it was hearsay and it's kids. And 2 months later, they were friends again. But that's how I diffused it. See, this is why I said you can't have ego, because I know what my purpose is when I communicate with people. It's cultivating preservation and prosperity, never to tear you down, beat you down, call you names, be disrespectful. So you diffuse a situation by reminding someone who they are to you and why you don't want this conversation to compromise that perception of them or that relationship or that foundation that you have. So that'll bring me into, I'm going to give you one more. I have like six things that you could do, but let's just start. Let's take these two. Do diffuse, right? Number two is you are diffusing, because sometimes you think you're diffusing and you're only making it worse. It's kind of like when a person says, I'm sorry, but, well, I didn't mean to make you mad, but, and then they go on about your actions and you're just like, was this an apology or did you just come for me again? Right? So, what I want you to do is as you're diffusing, no adjectives, no adjectives. No, you're mean, you were so rude. I can't believe you did this. You just so disrespectful. No adjectives. Only I, verb, you. I respect you. I honor you. I look up to you. I respect you. You see what I'm saying? Because again, we're talking about love. We're talking about preserving, building up, moving forward, being able to honor and respect each other in every situation. And this takes a lot of work because, again, it means that you have to strip ego and self out of the way for the purpose of building up that relationship. So even now, and when I say now, I mean in the last 5 years with my husband, it's I honor you, I appreciate you, I love everything you do for us. And we'll have these kind of fights. Like we're in the car traveling on a family vacation somewhere where we'll be for 2 weeks. And my husband will take a detour. It's not a detour, but he'll go his way. And I'm like, well, the GPS say go this way. And then we're like all mad at each other for like the next 5 minutes about why I can't just sit there and be quiet and let him drive the car, right? I've had to tell myself, I love this man. We are on vacation, driving. Who cares if we're an hour later getting there? I've got my family in the car. We're safe. Life is good. Again, preservation, cultivating relationships, and prosperity, right? So you need to always be mindful of what it is that you're trying to achieve. And at the end of the day, fighting about directions, what's the point? I also want to address, we're over 30 minutes, but I just want to address about boundaries. And I know a lot of you struggle with trying to create a boundary. And so if it's a loved one and you need to tell them, listen, I know I've been giving you money every time you need it, but I can't give you as much because, I have to get my finances in order, or I know I let you come over every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday to spend time with my son, but it's distracting to me. It keeps me from my goals and my work objectives. Remember these things. Remember their perspective, right? Which is very different from yours. This is your boundary, not theirs. I also want you to remember that their journey up to this point, that thing that you're doing means something to them, means something different to you. Honor it. They're entitled to feel how they feel. Honoring doesn't mean you agree and keep going on with it, but you recognize the importance of it to them. Don't belittle people and they're not allowed to feel because you feel different. Because if someone were treating you that way, you would not like it. Okay. And then always keep in mind that with this boundary, the reason I'm creating the boundary is to cultivate the relationship, is for preservation and prosperity. And I really think authenticity too. It boils my blood when I see people in all unauthentic relationships, um, because you're just playing a role or playing a game because you don't know how to tell someone who you are and what you need. It's selfish because the person on the receiving end of your inauthenticity is in relationship with someone they don't know. And I want you to think about how you would feel if you were in relationship with someone to only find out months, years later that they weren't who they said they were, that they were holding back all these things from you because they did not know how to communicate this hard thing with love. So just think about that as you move forward. And please share your comments. I will get notifications if you leave a comment, even if you're watching the replay. So go ahead and leave a comment. When I get that notification, I will address it. If it's something mean and unnecessary that's not going to cultivate relationship, preserve, or be prosperous, then I'll just ignore it and block you from my channel. So that's it. I'm just so glad you're here. You heard this message today. Leave a comment. Let me know what you got out of this. Share your experiences and your insight and your perspective with me. I'd love to hear your thoughts. So thank you so much for joining me for this week's Ignited Teachable Moment, and I will see you next week. Until then, be motivated, be inspired, continue to be a life ignited.